100 Days of Code and AMA Ask Me Anything. As always, a quick starter here on what we do on the stream. A lot of the questions are derived from our Discord channel that you can go to and join yourself anytime you want to. It is located out there at this location, discord.com/invite/Hasura. We also have a website, as you can see here, just next to my head. And on that is a link to our Discord, the question issue list, and a whole bunch more around all that. So you can go in, click on Get Started, and ask a question right here, or you can look at the existing questions that are already in the list. So check that out. Submit a question, look at the questions there, maybe answer a question. It's up to you what you want to do. And join the Discord. It's more than just questions. It's conversations about architecture, design, all of the things that come into play whenever you're using Hasura, GraphQL, REST APIs, whatever it is. We have a good time in there and have a lot of great conversations. So join the Discord and we'll see you there. For now, though, we're going to get started with the next thing that we're up to here on the 100 Days of Code and AMA. And what we are going to do today, from a technical perspective, is a full migration. I've done parts of migrations and such earlier in other streams, but we're going to do like a full cycle migration, get at least a table or two created, just so that we know that we have a table, we have metadata, we're going to set up a seed, and we're going to get full cycle going. And this is what you would need to do to set up basically any development environment, all right? So first things first, we're going to do that 10-second quick setup that we always do. We're just going to call this, let's see, make dir full cycle development workflow. All right, and in here, let's check our version on our CLI. Did I not type that right? Is it just version? I always do that so much. Is up to date. Yes, I'm on V5, or Alpha 5, I should say. Also, let's hear, how do we, there we go, make it bigger this way. Gonna make it bigger so we can see where and what we're doing here with this thing. And then pop, go full screen. Okay, first things first. Hasura init. And we're just going to leave it named Hasura. It lets us create a directory, or it creates a directory for us. And then in that directory, as we have come to know, we have several key directories in that directory: metadata, migrations, and seeds, and one file, config.yaml. So if I'm going to open up code, one directory below this. So I'm actually opening up the full cycle development workflow folder in Visual Studio Code. And there we go, pop that bigger. There we go. And, oh, come on, come back. Hit the wrong key there. Okay, so here's our three directories. Our config YAML, it's pointed at localhost. We're gonna work against localhost initially. We're gonna work against localhost, and then we're gonna spin up, like in the cloud or something like that. We'll spin up another instance somewhere else, or we'll destroy our instance, but we'll maintain our project and our migrations, metadata and schema, and we'll migrate, i.e. redeploy that to a new instance that has nothing. So we can see all of our work rebuilt in a new place, right? And this is basically the workflow that you set up for development teams, right? So any new person can join the team, clone the repo, grab all the containers, grab the migrations, metadata, and seeds they need. Boom, they're deployed and up and running again in like, seconds. It takes almost no time for this to actually work once you've gone through the exercise a few times. Now, notice I'm in the root directory here. I still want to get one more thing. Firefox, open up for me. All right, and then in here, we're going to type Hasura docker quick start This is something I always do. I go out to this page and then I grab the latest Docker Compose file. Boom, there we go. We have it now. Now a few tweaks. These are not things that you actually need to do, but I'm going to mention them. If you want to access your Postgres server, you will need to go here and add ports. Like that, except we don't want 8080 because that's the GraphQL engine. We want 5432 and then map it to 5432, which is the Postgres port number. Okay, so that's one change. The other thing is if you're going to put this in a repo and you don't want passwords out there, you need to change these to environment variables that will be brought in and interpolated into the Docker file when the Docker file is executed, or passed in via the CLI, like when you actually do Docker compose up whatever and you pass in the variables then, or whatever else your other solution is. Maybe you have a secrets vault or something like that. So there are options. I'm not going to mess with them because I don't mind those passwords being there. They're the default ones. They're a great way to get started. And you know what your connection strings are. We're going to use one database for this initial migration. And let's see here. So this one's called Postgres. And one thing you can do if you want to try out multiple databases, you could add another one here and call it something else, but we're not going to do that either. And then you just add environment strings here. Also not going to do that right now. But I am going to show you connection to multiple databases and how the metadata works in regards to that these days with V2, because it is different and the capabilities, the extra capabilities are pretty awesome. The hack cited mentions Postgres works without the ports open. If Docker is running correctly, it shouldn't be mapping or making those ports available on the local machine if you don't say open up the port and map it. I mean, maybe it does it on Windows or something, Windows Docker or Mac Docker. This is Linux Docker, so I don't know. That's an interesting one. But generally speaking, I have to open up the port to be able to access the database. So in that regard, let's just go with the port being needing to be open, because I mean, whatever the case, it does need to be open. Whether it's open here or it's open some other way, it needs to be open. Otherwise, you can't have things connect to it and work. Now, I should add, this is very important, I'm not adding the port for Hasura to work. Hasura already has like an internal map part that works. This is for external tools connecting to Postgres. So that's important to note. That might be where the confusion is. So anyway, we're going to open it that way because I may want to access the database. We may want to access the database and check out what our migrations are giving us, right? Like let's say we want to actually write a migration ourselves, which I'm probably going to do at least one just to show how we can write a manual migration in SQL and then add it to the Hasura migration flow, because it's different than if you use the console to just do all the migrations. So we're going to do a little bit of each of those. All right, let's flow with this. We got that one. We're going to open the local terminal here back up, and let's do Docker compose up-d. Oh, a routine problem that I have is I'm usually running Docker pieces already. So let's do Docker stop. I really got to quit putting myself in this position and remember to stop my Docker pieces or Docker things. And let's bounce back to here and do this actually. Firefox, closing that down. Docker PS gives you a list of the actively running Docker components. Then Docker stop stops any particular instance that you may want to stop. And then you take the container IDs and pass that to stop to, whoops, stop the particular containers. Oh, let's fix that one. All right, and then what we have already, we have Alpha 5 of Hasura, so that's important to note. We have Postgres 12 and Postgres latest, not particularly pertinent at the moment. I would run Docker Compose down, hack-sided, as mentioned here. But the reason that wouldn't work for those particular instances is because the particular instances launched from Docker Compose in those previous instances was launched with a different Docker Compose file, so they're slightly different, and thus they won't map correctly. You mentioned this command, right? So, and that is, it's a little tricky. I've tried doing that before, and it leaves random instances out there doing arbitrary stuff. So this way we know we got nothing now, and the images are these, so we'll know what we'll initially not have to pull, thank goodness. So on that note, oops, here we are. We're going to Docker Compose up, and since I'm going to run it in this terminal, I'm just going to actually run Docker Compose up, and then we get our tail of all the good bits of what are happening on the servers. There's a GraphQL engine and the Postgres engine, and it's just sending back all the results of what has occurred. So it looks like, based on information here, we're not getting warnings or errors or anything. There's our telemetry, help us improve Hasura, da-da-da-da-da, read more about opt-out, etc. So all of these things are set and started, and we can bounce back over here and work in this terminal for now. Right, so we are going to navigate back into Hasura. We did our Hasura init, so we've initialized this project. We got our two key components. Now imagine, if you will, in here, all the web dev, right? We could have another folder there, or you could go and even you could even put all of your stuff right here in the root with the Docker Compose file. Okay, so your project just gets added to this directory, or this directory gets added to your project, and that's how you get started. You can add the Hasura directory just like it's some other directory within the project related to whatever. So it's good to keep all that together within the application that you're building. Now we're in Hasura. We're going to type in Hasura console, and it's going to launch the console for us and fire off Firefox to get us up in here. And now that we're running our local instance here, 9695, I'm going to mention one other thing. There's also the server running at localhost 8080, and it looks the same. Now often, during the initial setup of all these things, there might be some confusion. You may bounce into this screen and you're at localhost 8080/console. And if you make changes here, they aren't going to become migrations. And then you will be angry at yourself. I don't have migrations. What, Dad, burn it. I made the changes in localhost 8080 instead of the Hasura console launched instantiated console, right? Which is over at 9695. The easiest way to fix that, I'm going to show you right now, is go in here, go in your Docker Compose, find the environment variable, right, that says enable console, and set this to false. Okay? Now, let's get over here, and we're going to kill this, Control-C, and then Control-C again. It shuts down everything, and then we are going to Docker Compose up again. Now relaunch it with those new environment variable settings. And as soon as that looks like it's good, and it looks like it, so we'll bounce over here. Now remember, in Visual Studio Code, I'm still running that console that's pointed at localhost 8080, but is instantiated from the local executing terminal with the command Hasura console. So it's at localhost 9695. That's the locally instantiated one. I'm going to refresh that. And see, we can still connect to it with our console, but it's not the one that the server itself is running. If we open up a new terminal and we type in localhost 8080, we get this, which is the better, more secure way if you're going to deploy it to production, or when you deploy it to production, I should say. And it also helps in local dev like this, because then you don't have this thing floating around that you accidentally might log into and then all of a sudden make changes, and then you're like, I don't have the migration. So this is the easiest way to prevent yourself from doing that. Just go ahead and disable the console. You won't need that, and then bounce out and run the locally instantiated one via Hasura console. So that'll keep your stuff nice and clean and make sure that the things that you are doing are migrations that are being created. So with that said, let's create a migration. Bounce over to data. Let's add a schema. I always do this. You don't have to add schemas. You can just add tables directly to the public schema, which is the default one that Postgres provides you. But like I was saying, I always like to kind of keep things in schemas, so then I can have stuff organized like the core user system, right? We have that, and then bounce over here to the server, and let's do another schema and call it the enterprise ERP planner, which is kind of redundant because the ERP is like enterprise resource planner or whatever. So there we go. So those would be that system. And then, whatever, you can add multiple schemas depending on what applications you're building, and you have your applications pointed at different schemas. You can even break out security per schema per Postgres. Or in the case of SQL Server, there's a way to break out namespaces like this and do kind of effectively the same thing with security breakouts and things like that. So I always do that. And then in here, let's create a table. We'll just have a users table, or user table, ID, UUID. I'm going to add some of these general things that I always add. If you watch this stream regularly, this seems like old hat, just stuff Adrian is always typing. Okay, so and then a stamp. I love my timestamps. Add the function there. And let's just do counter just for the heck of it, and we'll do integer, auto increment, and that looks fun. We'll add a primary key and then add that table. Okay, and then let's add one in enterprise ERP too. Create table. This has many things, and we'll just do ID, UUID, generate random UUID, unique, something. And let's see here, we'll do auto increment, and then we'll do something else, right? And then let's do numeric, and then here let's pick random, and then we'll do another stamp, timestamp, now, and then let's do JSON stuff. We'll pick the JSON B type, pick JSON build object so that it'll build the thing that you get into an object, or verify that it's an object. Should we index on any of this stuff? Let's say we're going to query on something else, and that these randoms are, well, they wouldn't be unique, so they might not be unique. So we're not gonna threaten ourselves with that. So let's go with other things, and then let's add Boolean. We'll just make it default to true all the time, and then more things. What else we got here? We got big int auto increment, date, time, timestamp, numeric. Oh, let's do a date. We'll do that, and then we'll call this date sampler, and we'll call one time sampler. We can look at the differences in those things like that. All right, so this is all groovy. We've got all our defaults, set our primary key, and I'm gonna add that. And just for good measure, and to ensure that we have some good metadata that we're also saving in here, so I can show you how to do that, let's add another table. Not that this is the only metadata that's kept. There's already some metadata in there, but I want to get some relationships and things like that in there. So relatable things, and we're going to put in let's put in not wise key, or we'll just call this the key. Unique needs to be unique. No redundancies there. We're going to set that as primary key, and then here we'll set many things ID. We're going to set this to UID, and then that will actually be related back to, what table does it think I'm doing this in? Reference table. There's that. Huh. That's kind of confusing. Let's do this real quick. We're just going to create this table. And I think I've dorked up something where it's trying to put it in the wrong schema, because there's the schema. I thought we were in this schema. So let's do this schema. Relatable things, and then we'll do the key. Auto increment that. We'll pick the key, and then many things ID, UID, and then let's just add that. There we go. Yeah, I did something that messed up the correlative creation. I think it thought it was in here, but it's not in there. So we're going to modify and then add a foreign key. Oh, I hit that, didn't I? I just hit this. If you pick the wrong one, it's going to relate back to whatever. So I want to do reference schema here. And you can relate things across schemas. Schemas are not like separate databases. They're just kind of an almost kind of virtual thing here. The reference table. Oh, reference table is the thing that it refers back to or refers down to, right? From a primary key, foreign key perspective. So there's that reference table. Reference schema just gives you which one you're referencing here, right? And then the column is, we're going to do many things ID back to the ID of this has many things table. And that will save. There we go. So now we have that relationship. And let's go back to relationships and we'll look at that. So we can add it and it'll be an object relationship, which means relatable things with the many things ID will relate back to its parent ID. Okay, this is the foreign key, back to the parent primary key, and give us one object for the many things that we may query. So a row coming back with relatable things that has .many things ID, right, relates back to this, and we can get the related this has many things row also back to that. So let's save that relationship and then go to this has many things, and we're going to see the opposite, right? So this is going to be an array. So relatable things, many things ID, can get many of this many things. So it's a one-to-many relationship, and that's why you can get an array back from relatable things. All right, so those are in there. The tables are in there. All this information is in there. This is all metadata, right? So if we go back to Visual Studio Code and close the Docker Compose, we don't really need to deal with that anymore. And we look at metadata though, not metadata, I mean migrations. We see all the migrations. Here is core system created. Then Enterprise ERP Planner is created. Then the user is created. And then we created, this has many things. And then we created relatable things. And then finally added the constraints and relationship, the foreign key, the references that are on update and delete restrict. So that's what we added in that order, and it created the migrations in that order for us. Okay. Now, let's say someone went out there, autonomous of that workflow, okay, and did something that we didn't expect, like create a table. I did not want to start Golang. I wanted to actually, don't we have data grip? Try to do this in a third-party tool just to show you how this works. Yes, exit, there we go. So data grip is opening now, and Golang's closing. We're not doing Go, we're just doing a workflow. All right, so now we have data grip open, and it's opening one of our previous projects. Which should connect to that localhost database because it uses the exact same connection, which has the exact name, database name, the exact name, everything else previously. And we should see, let's refresh that because it pulls up the cached copy of all this stuff. And we want to look at the core system, and what else did we just add? We added enterprise. Those are the two things that we added. So now that's refreshing up there. And when that refreshes, it'll show us our schemas that we expect. There we go, core system, user, and enterprise. So in core system user, let's look at the tables. There's our table with our generate random UUID, text, timestamp, integer. There's the primary key, and it's also a unique key. So there's two keys on that table. Let's go in here, let's right click, say new table, and it's going to give us this dialog, right? And this is something we can do if we wanted to create a table ourselves. We could use something like this. And instead of writing the SQL script, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to use this cool interface and say, let's add a key, and then we'll add UUID type, okay? Then I'm not going to set a default key or default value right now, but I'm going to set primary key. I'm going to say it needs to be unique. And then let's create another one. You'll notice it's creating the SQL below for us. So let's see here, value of cost. So then we'll do numeric. And we'll do, let's see here, we'll leave it as null for now. Then we'll do another, let's add a stamp. And here, we're gonna add this times stamps. And then here, we do, I think I can do now. Yep, there's that function. And then, did it add? It did add. Okay, so here's stamp, here's value of work, here's key UUID. Then we have a unique index, okay, for the primary key. And then we also have a constraint that sets primary key. Now another way to do that, let's actually take this part off like this, okay? And then here, we're gonna put primary key like that. So that's gonna be our creation script. So now I can execute this. Let's copy this though. Copy. And I can get a table. There's our table, just called table name. Nothing really special there, right? But now if we go back to our interface here, and let's click on API, we can see we have all our stuff here. We have our enterprise planner stuff and our user stuff. Let's go back to data. And you'll notice there's table name, okay? But we don't have a migration for it. So I forewarn you, don't just click track immediately. If you want to ensure that you have migrations for things, you don't want to add the metadata and then not have the underlying migration that would create that table for you. So let's go manually create that table specifically. So in here, I'm going to actually kill the console just for a second. And then we're going to take a look at Hasura migrate. We'll just look at the help. I tell you, shortcut keys. There we go. Let's bring that up a little bit. And what we have apply, create, squash, and status. And what we want to do is create a migration so that this will be the migration for that additional table that we just created out of band of the migrations. Okay, so this is the way that you would need to bring in something that someone else might have created. So otherwise, you can stick to the console and do all your migrations that way. But this is a way that you can step out of that, create a migration in SQL, and then go through here and add it to the migration so you don't miss out. Now, as I showed before, these folders are in order, right? This is the order that they create. And they need to be in order because that's the entire point of schema migrations, or not the entire point, but one of the main points of schema migrations is to have that version flow to be able to move back and forth between those iterations of changes. And you do small incremental changes at a time. Highly, 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 strongly encourage and recommend to do not try to do massive changes like with a bunch of tables and a bunch of key changes and a bunch of alters all at the same time in one migration step. Keep them small, keep them minimal. It will save you over time in massive ways. And it will prevent you from, bluntly stated, nuking your project. Okay, so small incremental steps is what migrations are all about. Keep to that practice. Stay disciplined with it, and it will serve you very well. On that note, let's create one migration that creates this table. So we'll type in Hasura, Hasura migrate, create, and then let's see what our options are for that. So we have a bunch of standard stuff, admin string, etc. So if you're pointing this at a particular server and you're passing the admin string via the CLI, you can do that. But we're just going to do the minimal things, and we're going to give it, let's see here, metadata schema string, SQL stream up. We can prospectively, I think the minimum, let's find out, migrate, create. Accepted one arg. You have to name it. So let's name it create new table. And we have to do the database name now because we have multiple database support and we're just in default. So there, a little trial and error, just because it slipped my mind what the minimal were there. But basically when you do create for a migration, you need to pass the name of the migration and you need to pass the database that it's going to create this migration for. In our case, we only have the default database. So you just pass default. All right, so it created one. So if we go over here, and is this our create? I think so, because we just have a blank up and a blank down. We have that script, which we just wrote out. Create table core user system dot table name. So this is the schema. This is the table name. And then we have all the rest of that stuff, okay? Now, I don't like this being called table name. So let's actually call this another important thing, okay? Now, that's our up. We know that that works. That is valid SQL, and it will create that table for us. But we also want to create a drop table for the down step, okay? And we do that just like this, easy peasy. So I'm going to go over here to data grip, and there's table name. I'm going to create a console here, and I'm going to actually run drop table name, just like that. And we can look and watch it drop it. Oh, it does not exist because we need, yeah, see, we're in the public schema, and we need to be, in the, is it core system? We picked it, pick it. Drag to reorder. I don't want to, oh, okay, there we go. Now we're in the right one. So being that we're in it, we can just run it this way. It's going to drop that table. So there we go. We dropped that table we created. So now we can purely use just the migration to do these things, and it will be called by the new name, right? Now a question popped up. Would we need Hasura's raw SQL interface for this migration? Now, if you're practiced and you're in a good workflow and you have these over here set up, right? These migrations, I would suggest to not execute direct SQL at this point because we have the migration set up. We can break it out and do individual pieces, and we can keep our migrations small, which is the most effective way over time to manage this. If you have a database, let's say you're adding a database and there's a bunch of, or a schema, for instance, or a database, whatever, and you want to add a bunch of stuff all at one time, the SQL interface is great for that. But here, there are a few problems in it being great and enabling you to do this. You can tell it to save the thing as a migration, but it will only save the up step for the migration. So let's say you have 200 tables in the migration. You have no down step for those 200 tables, which gives you no way to step back to a previous state in that situation. Kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of migrations overall. Now, if the thing that you're really just trying to do is get the schema built and then just manage like the metadata or something like that in Hasura, and you don't care about migrations and you're not doing migrations, then yeah, you can do massive changes that way. It's also great if you just want to test or try out certain things, but overall, for development over time, the best way is to really stick to a strict migration workflow so that you know what state your database is always in, and you don't have states that are kind of branched out and in states that may be unknown. If that happens, you get into a situation where your software development for your application will be out of sync with your software development for your database, i.e. your SQL, your GraphQL, or whatever could be out of sync with what you expect from the application development side. So if you're one developer, might not be that big of a deal, but if you're working in a team, I highly recommend sticking to migrations and keeping them small. Don't just submit a bunch of SQL against the server and have it make a bunch of additions or changes or updates. Stick to migrations, keep it minimal like this, and have that be your development workflow. If you want to execute SQL, probably should be in like an automated process or managed in some other way programmatically, etc. So that's my 2 cents from. I'll just make this admission. That's my experience from 20 years of development, seeing teams in big enterprises start out with no migrations and move to migrations and learn how beneficial they can be, and seeing even like startups start out just hacking things together and then the flow crumbling and then needing to move to migrations to make it much easier to do development. So this discipline might seem a bit rigorous, might seem a bit superfluous or extra or just too much up front, but it'll seem like small efforts over the course of a project, and the benefits of it will they'll show up in so many ways. You'll find yourself going, oh, I'm glad we did the migrations this way so that we didn't run into this roadblock or whatever, or we didn't have this experience that you just heard about at a meetup or something where you're like, oh my God, somebody lost their whole thing and then had no way to migrate back, right? So this is a great way to do this, and I highly recommend following the mantra, following the discipline of small steps for each bit of the migration as you move along. And with that, we have our up and we have our down, and the easiest way to get that going now, because if we look back, let's look at the console real quick just to see the current state. This is without the migration executed or anything. We just added the migration to our code base. But over here, you'll see, there's core user, but there's not that other core user system table. If we go back over here, we just see these things sitting here. No untracked tables, because remember, we removed the table via data grep with manually written SQL. And then same thing here, nothing extra sitting out there waiting to go. But we want to add that table. We do want that one out there, right? So with that, let's bounce out of that. I'm going to kill the console instantiation again, clear that, and just type Hasura migrate apply. Oh, whoops. I keep forgetting. 2.0, you have to include the database. Even if you just have one database, you got to at least say use the default database. And there, we have applied the migration. Let's open up our console again. And go back to data. Now note, we applied a migration. We didn't apply the metadata for that migration. So Hasura doesn't know that that table is something we want to use. So it's kind of ignoring it at the moment. But if I click on core user system, you see that that table does now exist. Let's add metadata by clicking on track. There we go. Look at that. Okay. So it got us in there with our key, etc. Let's do another migration. Let's click on key, and it says UUID unique, and I want to add a function here, generate random UUID, so that we always get something good. I'm going to save it. So that then added, if we go back over here, here's our create table and our down table. Here is our add the key default. There it is, generate random UUID, and our down as we would expect, right? So go back over here. Everything else looks good. Let's click on relationship. Do we want to connect it to anything? That is the question. Looking at that, doesn't look like it's connected, so we're just going to leave it as is. We've got the metadata added. Everything is pretty much set to go. Now this is where things might get a little confusing and might get a little, a lot of questions often come up. So with metadata, how do you keep iterative steps with your metadata? I'm going to show you how to do that right now too, because it's out of band of the iterative steps of the migrations. So let's close this down. Let's kill the console, because we have everything we want for our migrations right now. And if we do a get status, we notice there's no repo. What developer sin have I committed? Well, let's fix that immediately. And by doing so, whoops, oh, I did it at the wrong level. Let's go out to the root here, get the whole project, get init from the root. In doing so, I have started us down the path of being able to iteratively move through steps with our metadata. Okay, and what I mean by that is how I'm going to make sure that we have iterative version steps for our metadata is I can, one, version it and tag it in Git if I want to, but also just from the pure functionality point of view of the workflow in Git, I can have it be a branch, or I can just have it be part of the commit cycle with everything else in the development. So that gives us a way to move back and forth between metadata states, but we just do it with Git. Hasura and the metadata itself, the individual points of the state being versioned throughout workflow, not done in Hasura or the metadata itself, it's done through Git. So this is kind of how I do my workflow, and it works pretty well, right? I mean, Git is tested and tried and beat on, and it works. It works exceptionally well. So big recommendation with your metadata, version it and iterate through it, figure out a process or a practice with Git that works for you and your team, and then use it to move through your metadata and everything. The way I'm going to do that right now is I'm just going to add, first let's do a git ignore file, because that's important. And then I'm going to add the normal annoying files that we just don't really want to deal with. And if I ever open up data grep or WebStorm or something like that, IDEA is a directory that I don't want to save for everybody, because everybody doesn't need my settings from those IDEs, and then just add whatever else you need here, like you do in a project. Now, as far as the migrations, there's no specific thing that I would add to the get ignore for the migrations themselves. So in this, now that we have that stuff, now I can do a get status. I can add all these bits. And, whoops. And we'll call this first metadata state. And let's talk metadata for a second. Metadata, databases, there's our default functions and tables of anything, and you can see there is our settings. So it points to the environment variable of our metadata. It points to the database being called Postgres, or that it is a Postgres database. This would, of course, point to the other pertinent things. And then tables and functions would have the tables and functions for the database, which is, as we know, there is the table, which part it is of the schema, and so on and so on. There's a foreign key, etc. And of course, this needs to know things like the foreign key, because Hasura draws its own foreign key specifically for this data so that it knows between the GraphQL elements, etc. Hasura then knows which entities can be connected and which can be related through the graph to each other. This is very important that this metadata is here for that. So that's all we have at this point. But as I was saying, it's not backed up, it's not saved, but it is in Git now. So it's ready to be versioned in this default state. So there's nothing else we really need to do at the moment. But generally speaking, let's say you have a database and you don't have the metadata saved at this point, okay? One of the things you can do is type Hasura metadata export, okay? And when you do that, find config YAML. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. Let's do that again just to get the correct info. There we go. Metadata exported. That's exactly what we wanted to see and what we expected. And all it did in this particular situation, since all the metadata is already there, it just went through and said, here's all my updated metadata, okay? Because it pulls it from the server that you have pointed to in config.yaml. You can pass it to the server if you want to point it at a different server, or you can change the config YAML server so that it points at a different server. But in this situation, it looked at our server and said, okay, this is the current server. I'm going to grab all the metadata, all the relationships, all the things in this server that Hasura knows about currently and put them locally into my metadata state, which is what it did. We already had all that stuff, so I didn't really have to do anything, which is also great. But if you have some metadata, you have some things in the server, and you know it's not synced to the folder here, do this action, Hasura metadata export, and it'll pull it all down. Now, this is basically our V1 of the metadata, right? So this is a V1 of our middleware tier of data abstractions, etc. in the Hasura GraphQL and REST APIs. So we want to save those. So in Git, what is it? Git version, and we're on that, okay. So we did the commit. We don't have it out on the remote, but at this point, so Hackside had just asked, we have Hasura metadata export, which is what we just did, right? So do we still need Git? And I would say yes, because now if additional changes are made, they're just going to keep getting written. If you're using Hasura console, like we've been doing to do migrations, any metadata is also going to still be piped into that, right? So if you want to be able to roll back to this point in time, okay, you need to be able to move to this point in metadata to be able to push the metadata to the Hasura server to get to this point in time. And the only way really to do that with metadata, because metadata is always a point in time dump. It's always either the most active known thing of wherever you're at. So if we did a bunch more migrations and we did changes, and then let's say I wanted to move back to this migration right here. This is the one where the only thing we had gotten to was just the user table. And that would remove all the other elements and all the other migrations that we had. And if I did that via the migrations, that would work, but the metadata would still be in the same state as it is right now with all the additional tables and relationships and things like that that we added. So to be able to roll back to that point, I would have had to make a commit and probably do something like tag it to identify it, to say like, this is this point in time. And then I'd have to move back to that tag, or I'd have to move to a branch if you did a branch in Git to apply that metadata from that state in time to the Hasura server. So that's how you would have to do versioned, iterative, time-based metadata management with Git. And it's the easiest way really to do it, is to do it through something like Git. Since Git is, version control, that's what its purpose is, right? Is to manage your point in time state of where you're at in development. So that's the easiest way to manage metadata, since it's only managing the current point in time state of the metadata. To move back to a different point in state of metadata, you need to use something like Git to move back to that point. All right, so that answered that question. It sounds so complicated. It's not really that complicated, but it sounds complicated when you have to step through all the pieces, because there are, like, migrations manage their own state, right? Because we're doing it by the folder. The folder is the state and point in time, the snapshot in time of what you move up to or back to. So it's kind of confusing. And in a way, I would even make the argument that you could skip migrations if you just manage all the SQL in the most up-to-date state. If you manage all that in one big SQL file, that would be fine. And you could manage things through Git again. And then if you move back to one version, you'd be doing your metadata and your schema state in the same way. So that's another possible way to do the workflow, where you're not using migrations, but you do have to always make sure your commit practice is really on point. You have to make sure that your full SQL file actually executes all the time and it is in a good working operative state. But with migrations, you can move back and forth, and like if one little bit breaks, then you can pinpoint that specific migration that breaks. Big SQL file, kind of harder to debug the exact point in the file where something might break. All right, so that covers migrations and metadata, two of the biggest key points, and I'd argue probably the most important points of the entire back end of any system is the database and how you're going to interact with the database. And in this case, that would be the GraphQL or REST services API that Hasura is providing. But there's a lot of other pieces, such as blah, blah, blah. I could go off in the weeds, but we're going to talk about how you grow weeds with seeds. Okay, that was a dumb analogy. Weeds just appear. Okay, let's bounce out of this. Oops. There we go. And then get down to the base minimum here, and we look at our seeds directory. We have no seeds. So let's type Hasura help. And here we go. We got Hasura seed, manage seed data. Okay, that's cool. So let's look further. And what do we get? We get apply and we get create. Create. I can't talk today. I can't ever talk. I always fumble my words here and there. I apologize. I hope I'm understandable. There we go. Wet my whistle a little bit. I can whistle. I don't do that very often. Okay, so we have apply and create. Those are the available commands to seed. So let's do Hasura seed create. All right, we have one argument. So what is our argument? It is aliases. Oh, we have aliases. So data. Oh yeah, we need to point at the database again, and we need to. I feel like we need to add the name there. So anyway, first steps, and then database name default, and there we go. So Oh, let's do that. Did I? Ah. What did I do that? Does it do that? Interesting. I haven't created a lot of seeds, just a few. But that gets us going. Okay, there's our first seed. And it opened up the SQL file, but it opened it up in VI. I didn't want it to open up in VI. I just wanted to open in code, just like we got right here. So that's how you create a new seed. The command is Hasura seed create first steps, and then pass it the default database like that, or whatever database you want the seed for, and then we can get to work here. And this, as you can see, first steps.sql, it is SQL, right? Because I love it, let's go open up DataGrip again. DataGrip has some pretty cool functionality. When you have to just write blunt, straightforward SQL, it's a pretty powerful tool, and it's great to use in conjunction. If you have your own SQL tools, this is usually a good time to connect those to the database to tweak things. Especially if you have like database administrators or database developers working out of band of the GraphQL or the REST API interface. Sometimes you might have a tool like this. So that's kind of why I'm bringing this in. There's a million ways to go do this, and you can do this via the Hasura interface too. But I'm just doing it this way just to show that yes, you can work in other tools too and still integrate that into your Hasura workflow, right? So there's not limitations being put on anything in that regard. Let's look at our databases. There's our Postgres server, and there is our schemas. There's core, user system, and let's get in there and, we need a refresh. So let's hit recycle refresh. And there's our user table and another important thing. So that looks groovy. Let's add some users. So in here, what do we got? Modify table, edit data. Let's bring that up. What does that do? Okay, so that gives us this. Now, just playing around. There's DDL, DML. Here it is. So there's our create table that it generates. We have the ID, which is going to be generated like that. We have a name, stamp, which will also be generated as is. And then we have a counter, which is using serial. Now in here, SQL script, SQL generator, generate DDL to clipboard, all these tools. I wonder if there's just a straight insert. I think I'm going to just manually create it, because why not, right? What does this do? Oh, that does that too. Reformat, use create and replace. So you can add safety there, create and replace. Yeah, we're just going to write the SQL. So let's open up a console. Start off with insert into, what is it, core user system. I'm going to put it there. And then we're going to add it to user, to these values, into these columns. So yep, that's what we want. But let's take counter off. We don't really want that. We don't really want ID because the database can do that for us. So really we only have name. So let's add John Smith. Okay, and then we'll add final bit there. And what is this complaining about? Oops. Expect into change. Oh yeah, let's do this. Let's change it to Postgres. There we go. Yes, please change that. And then let's change the schema too to the correct one. Here we go. All right, so now it knows we're in the right thing there. Oh, what is? No, I did that. Oh, insert into this values is what it is. There we go. Let's see what's that complaining about. Refresh schema, add column. Oh, I did it backwards, didn't I? John Smith. to name. No, that's not right. It should be name. Oh, yep. Good old SQL, single quotes. There we go. Okay. So that's all groovy. That's one. Let's add a few others. Let's add Sally Smith. Let's add Moha Jackson. Then we'll add Elizabeth Warren. Then we'll add, whoops, Donnie Ferguson. Not adding that other Donnie, don't worry. Then we'll add, let's see here. Who's somebody cool that we should add? We should add, Chuck Schuldiner. Let's see, and then Ingve Malmsteen, because that is a serious name. And then we'll add Gracie Abrams. Oh, there we go. I'm on that, yeah. So honor hack-sided you crook. You're in the DB now. You're tracked. You're tracked. Okay. So to test, we're going to actually take all those, not run them there, and we're going to put them over here in our seed. Then let's do Hasura seed apply. Oh, look at there. I keep forgetting it. Like I said, this is a database name, default, and boom. Seeds are planted. So now our trees will be growing. All right, so with that, let's go take a look at the database. So even though we didn't add it there, we can go boop. Let's refresh our tables. Now we're going to open that up, and look at there, there's our data. And the counter is over here counting away as we would expect. So they're all in there. But even more excitedly, let's get in and check out our console again. Did I spell it wrong? Oh. Oh, I did. Sorry about that. You know what? Let's fix it. Go back into seeds. You crook. Right? You want to open a PR. Let me, so Hackside is going to help us out there. It's going to open a PR. Let's get back out there though. And we will put the repo out there in a minute. Okay, so that's out there. And we know though, it's all there. It's available, right? We just did the query. There's our data in our query. Our schema's there. You can see all the tables are there, as is evidence in the Explorer here. If we scroll down and we look at relatable things, for instance, we note here's that related item. So we can do like many things, the key, and then get the JSON stuff and other things and blah, blah, blah that are related to that particular thing. Very, very powerful. So just run that. Oh, whoops. Boom. Run that. It'll be empty. Yeah, as it should be. But you get the idea. We have now set up a developer workflow with migrations, with metadata, and with seeds. All of the things, which gives us an extremely powerful setup. But let's say the new developer has just sat down and said, all right, Adrian, I want to set up my environment with my database and my data that I can work with on my time with my tooling. And I say, okay, you're developer number 2. I'm going to get you access to that on GitHub, which right now, you, dear audience, can be all the other developers on the team. And let's go commit that to a repo. I'm going to just, new repo. And then let's go here and what should we call it? We'll call this, what was our directory name? Full cycle something other, full cycle development workflow. I'm going to zonk that out. Oh yeah, I closed the Firefox. Of course I did. Because that's how I do things. All right, there we go. And then, not bookmarks, I want to paste that in. Oh geez, that's not the name I want. Full cycle development workflow. Full cycle Hasura development workflow. All right, there we go. And then I'm just going to create with migrations, metadata, and seeds. There we go. So now we did the git init. We don't have the README added, but that's fine, whatever. We're going to do first commit, branch main, remote. Oh, they added branch. Okay, whatever, that's fine. Let's see where we at. We're here, we need to add that. So let's git add our seeds. What? Oh, I moved out of the directory. What did I do that for? There we go, git add, git commit, adding the seeds of our application tree. All right, git status, git remote. Let's add it now. So we'll do git remote add origin. This thing. Ah, not that many. No. Git remote add origin. That. Looks good. All right. So let's get, what is our branch? We are on master. So let's do git branch. Let's actually check out and create a new branch and check it out called main so that we're in sync with GitHub. And then through git status, that's all clear. So then we can do git push -u to sync our path here. Origin master. I still typed it. Let's do git push -u origin main. And then, what I should have done is git branch delete master. So now we just have main, right? Yep. Okay, and then git push. Can I do that? Did I break it with resyncing up there? Okay, let's take a look. Okay, there's main with all our stuff as we expected. I don't remember how to delete the remote branch. I'll fiddle with that later. Anyway, we're committed up on GitHub now, so hack-sided. If you want to get that PR out there, here's your repo to go submit that PR to. Okay. So, but on that note, let's do this. Clear list, remove full cycle, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to docker ps and docker images. So there's all that stuff. Let's do actually do this, docker remove image. This one I'm not using. Docker RMI. Let's do that one. Oh, well, okay, force it and Docker RMI. And we're going to zonk this one too. And yeah, it needs to be forced. I knew that, obviously. All right, so now we have no images. So there is no chance any of that data exists in any way, in any state whatsoever. And we're going to pull that down like we are a new developer just joining the team, right? And of course, that SQL Server image is irrelevant to this whole scenario. We'll talk about adding SQL Server images or SQL Server databases to Hasura later, though, on another day. And I have my image there just for that purpose. But anyway, codes, new directory. We're going to create a new one called make.dir. We're going to call it our new... No, actually, let's just git clone it. So we'll be the new developer, git clone. Oh, now I need to open my Firefox again to get that path. Because, of course, I got rid of the path, didn't I? Issues. No, wait. This thing. Then Adrian. And then, what did we just call that? Why am I typing so bad today? It's like the challenge of the century. So, yeah, we're going to get out there, repositories. And then, yeah, there it is. Just stuck it there. Let's go ahead and add a README. So there's our README, new added thing. This will be like all the new code. Think of this as all the new code. So we're going to get that latest commit, and we're going to get our Hasura stuff up and running. All right, so click on code, get the SSH git, and I'm going to bounce over to here and git clone that. I'm going to put it in our new developer setup, right? Then I'm going to bounce into that. There's all our stuff. There's our README and our Docker Compose. So let's take that Docker Compose up -D. All right, so there's our environment. It's pulling down a completely fresh new database and a completely fresh new container image instance of the Hasura GraphQL engine v2 alpha 5. So we are now confirmed and up and running with that. With that done, let's go into Hasura and check that out. We got all those bits. Looks good. And let's run our console real quick. Just to confirm our very empty, not set up API server. So as you can see, nothing in the Explorer. So it doesn't know anything about anything because there is nothing but the default public schema and such in the database. So hopefully I have proven at this point we have nothing here. All right. So back to this, I'm going to kill the console. Clear. Type Hasura, migrate, apply. Important. You want to do your migration first. You want the database to have all of the pieces first. The database always has to have all of the things first. And of course, I have forgotten to add the database name again. Default. Boom, migration's applied. And on that note, just to confirm, like I like to do, let's look. Data, ERP planner, there's our schema, there's our tables. And of course, because they're not in the metadata yet, they're not listed over here to the left under databases in the data manager section, okay? And over here, we don't want to hit track all because we're going to pull in our migrations, right? Whoops, I didn't mean to click on that. We are going to do the migrations. So on that note, let's bounce over here. And I'm just going to let that keep running so I don't have to keep launching it. I come in here, bounce this up bigger. And then, what was it? Next steps. So we just did Hasura migrate. Now we're going to do metadata. We're going to do apply. Metadata applied. Go back over here. I left it running so I can just hit refresh. Boom. Look at that. The tables are over here now. Our relationships are in here and intact. Array relationship for that. And the next one's going to have the object relationship, just like we talked about. Cool, cool, cool. Then bounce out of that. And then, of course, the last thing, last but not least, with the corrected data, so that we don't want to have incorrect names anywhere. Hasura seeds, or seed. Seeds is also an alias, right? So you can type seed or seeds. Apply. Oh, Adrian, come on. Remember to add the flag. There we go. The seeds have been planted. Look at that. Oh, but we got to confirm. We're not just going to believe. Did I seriously close Firefox? So now note over in the console, right? Yeah, I did leave it running. So here, just open this up. Open link. Oh, I didn't even think of doing that. That's a thing you can do with the with the terminal on Linux, on Ubuntu. So here we are. There's all our metadata in there, and here is all that under here. And let's write a GraphQL query because we love writing some GraphQL. Boom. User. Let's get that name list and confirm that our seeds have been planted, and boom. There we are. All right. Follow-up reminder for that last little section. Migrations first, then metadata, then seeds. You want to do it in that order. Okay. Arguably, I could have ran seeds right after I did the migrations because it's just direct inserts into the table, right? But out of practice, you want to make sure your pieces are in place before you insert data or other arbitrary things associated to those. So migrations first, then metadata, then seeds. That's just a good practice. And as Hacksighted said, again, you've got all the quotes today. Getting more excited every day. This is so cool. I agree. Absolutely great tool. I'm glad I get to work on it every day, honestly, because it is a really exciting, powerful tool. It removes so much from the menial code labor that one has to do and gets you that powerful connection to your data that you need and want so that you can really focus more on what you're trying to build for your end user. I mean, that's what the daily game of the developer is, right? Building something for the end user. How do you get there faster? How do you get there easier? How do you get there with more capability and more options for your end users, for you know, for getting value to them so that they can, you know, the real kicker here is so that you can get home to your kids or get home to your guitar playing or go out and see your art and music or whatever it is that you want to do, you know, or in this era, you know, cook dinner from that delivered food while we survive our pandemic. You know, whatever it is, that's really the kicker is, you know, getting value added so we can get back to life every day. That's a big part of all this. So hopefully this whole session has been helpful and answered a bunch of questions. I'm going to get to work cutting up this episode specifically because we answered so many things and splicing it into cool little shorts so the videos will be like 2 to 5 minutes about very specific things we just covered today. But this specific session will definitely serve as a great example of how to get started with that full development cycle flow and, you know, spread that among the team to make it easier for the team to get started with things and just get moving with everything.